account. And I'm Carol Cotter. I'm one of the behavioral health therapists over at the PS Clinic. This is Laura.
I'm Laura, also a behavioral health therapist at the PS Clinic.
All right, so we're glad you came.
Happy 2018. I know that we're about a month into the year to start talking about goals, but we thought it could be useful after people have kind of made some goals, set some goals, and revisit how things are going, what's not going well, and maybe increase your likelihood of achieving the goals you set out. And don't worry if your chips are making noise and stuff. I'll try to talk loud. So today, these are the things we're going to cover. Core values when setting goals, barriers to setting goals, the risk of goal setting, strategies, and self-compassion while setting goals. So a little disclaimer, I don't set goals very often. I'm not one for setting goals. I just often get disappointed in myself. I kind of like to live life, to see where it takes me type of attitude. But there really are a lot of benefits to setting goals. It gives direction and focus to life. It increases self-confidence, competence in a certain area, provides motivation, structure, and purpose. So if you're a goal setter doubter like me, consider these things. Something that's dear to me is values, and making sure that what we do in life is aligned with our core values. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the importance of identifying core values while goal setting. Before you set goals, you've got to be sure you're heading in the right direction, and that's the direction of your core values. It could be very easy to set a goal, take all the steps, achieve it, even get a lot of recognition, applause, and end up feeling really quite empty inside and not really authentic. And so if we're not setting goals that are in sync with our values, the end result, maybe we wanted to get to California, but we ended up in New York. So I think of values as a compass that point us in the right direction. And when we set goals that are in line with core values, we're more engaged in working towards our goals, more enthusiastic, and once we achieve our goals, there's a sense of fulfillment and meaning. So now, in the little handout you got coming in, there's a lot of papers. You'll see a paper with a wheel on it, and I'm going to explain this exercise that will take a minute to do together. But first I wanted to give information on this 5-year, 1-year, 1-month value clarification exercise. We don't have time to do it now, but I encourage you to do it at home. And it's a loose sheet of paper, so it's not in the paper clipped one. And it's basically, you scan there's a big shopping list of values in there. So you give it a read over, scan it, identify 5 or 10 of those values that are really meaningful to you and resonate with what's important in life. And then think about, if I had 5 years to live, what are 6 things I want to accomplish in that time? And then if I had 1 year to live, what would I want to accomplish? And would that be different than 5 years? And so on and so forth with 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day. And it's a neat way to kind of put into perspective what's really important, and are we spending time on the things that are most important to us. So now you'll find this circle in your page. So if everyone go ahead and flip through all those papers, I think it's the second to last paper.
Did everybody get crayons?
This is the wheel of life, and here you can see in the different slices like different common values. Feel free to cross out one of those or any of those that don't feel important to you. But for most people, these things are what they're trying to achieve and are important. And you'll see at the bottom of the circle, that's 1, all the way out to the rim is 10. And if it's a 10, you're really living in line with this value. So whoever this person is, man, their business and their career is important to them, and they're doing really well in that. But their life isn't really balanced with other things that's important. So go ahead and take a minute and fill it out so If you feel like you're living in accordance to that value, fill it out to 10 being the highest and towards the center being the lowest. And then we'll come back and talk about that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, any questions? Hands. The Wheel of Life, have you seen this before? And it gives a snapshot of how balanced the life is and helps with goal setting. So you take a minute and use your cards to fill of each of these categories if it's important to you. And you feel like you're living in alliance, then it's a 10. Or if you feel like I'm not giving this energy a lot of time, my energy, then it is a 0. And give yourself an eat if you need to. Don't worry about it. We'll just spend about 1 more minute. We'll come back into a big group now, and if you're still working, you can just quietly finish up. But anybody have any comments about what that was like for them, or anything they realized or noticed from doing that quick activity?
I'm not doing too good at money because I have too much fun.
I thought you were going to say you have too much money. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, that with all these sections is give or take, right? And we're spending a ton of time earning money and focusing on our career, it's really likely that our friends and family and significant others are going to suffer. So it's a big balancing trick. You can be having so much fun and social fun that you never go to work, you don't have any money. So it's definitely a balance. I like to think if this was the wheel on my car, how bumpy would my life be? And so a little quick snapshot of maybe what's important, what's not getting the attention that it needs, and maybe things that are getting a little too much attention in your life. Oh yeah, you can have a completely balanced wheel. And if you do, let me know. That would be great. So how many of you have ever set a goal and not achieved it?
It's an open-ended question.
Me too. There's a lot of barriers we face to setting goals. The reason I think it's so important to first identify what's important and valuable to an individual is to not fall into these top two. So people pleasing. Somebody will set a goal because it's what somebody else wants for them, but maybe not necessarily what they hold dear and important. Anybody have an example of a people-pleasing goal?
Go to Zumba.
Who are you trying to please by going to
My friend,
Zumba?
and I'm a girl.
Did you say
I move like those ladies can move. 6 months of
I know.
hell.
Yeah, and they look like they're having so much fun too. So you go to please your friend. Maybe your friends say, you need to be more social, get out of the house more, come exercise and do Zumba with us. But that's not really what's important to you. You don't need to move your hips all fancy. And then social pressure is similar. We set goals because we want to fit in, we want to be accomplished or successful. There's a lot of societal pressure to be a certain way, look a certain way, act a certain way, earn a certain amount of money. And if we don't achieve that, sometimes we feel like we fail or we're messed up, we're not part of society. Any examples of a goal that could be set for the wrong reasons is social pressure?
Having a family?
Yeah, that's huge. I think, even today, things are changing, but family is what you do. You have a family, and you take care and provide for your family, and you have meaning and purpose. And still, this single individual in this society is not valued as much as somebody with family. So I think for young folks, still in that age where they can have a family, there's huge pressure to do that. And for people who don't, there's pressure to overcompensate for that in other ways. Good example, Amanda. You might know you're falling into one of these two categories if you're using should statements. I should have a family. I should go to Zumba because then I'd be really cool. I should get a promotion. And one way language is really powerful, and if we can change our language, then that kind of changes our beliefs. And so replacing the word should with I desire comes more from the heart and less from the expectation. So I desire to spend half an hour a day walking and spending some time by myself. I would prefer if I was more organized so I didn't always feel behind at work. And just little words you can change to replace that. All or nothing thinking. How many people have ever set a goal, didn't achieve it, and so threw it out the window? I do this one a lot with sugar. I really want to eat less sugar in my diet. And then
You didn't make any goals.
You got me. Well, I tell myself it's not a goal, so I don't get so let down. But I don't know why I work in an office where people love baking. It's like so much. And potlucks. In primary care, like every single department has a potluck every other day. And so there's a lot of sugar in our office. And I'll say, I'm not going to eat sugar today. I come in, somebody made cookies, and I have a cookie, so I say, F it, and I eat the whole plate of it. So I think that's a great example of all or nothing thinking. And that falls into this need of perfectionism. If I can't do it 100% right all the time, then I'm not going to try at all. And so Carol's going to spend some time talking about self-compassion and setting realistic goals, but always be challenging your definition of success and checking in to see if you're striving for perfection, because nobody's perfect and we can't live how we want to live all of the time. And that can really be a good way to overcome that barrier. Messages in childhood. Now, we're given messages from the moment we're brought into this world. Sometimes the intent is really loving and kind, and the effects can be quite different. I'm trying to think of, what was that?
Clean your
Clean your plate. What can be the damage of that?
Talk about obesity and
Yes.
the pressure of, if you're not hungry, then don't make them eat it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guilty, I told my boys that.
Yeah.
Clean your plate.
The intention's really
That's what
good,
you
right?
want.
Yeah, you don't want food to go to waste, don't want to be ungrateful. Got to get all your vegetables. So I think that's a great example.
Another one that I was thinking of is, and I'm guilty, you go to school, you go to high school, you graduate, and then you go to college. Not everybody's college material.
Yeah.
I had a son who struggled with it, and we put pressure on him to go to school, and now he's in a trade school and he's doing extremely well. College wasn't his forte, but that's what we told him. You go to school, you graduate, you go to college, you get a job.
Yeah, you set up that expectation, and then if you don't live up to it, it can come into this negative self-talk. Well, I must not be smart. I must not work hard enough. I must not have the self-determination it takes to get to where I should be doing. And those messages we send ourselves are also quite sabotaging and can get in the way of goals. Thanks for those examples, Kelly. And then messages that we receive from our family, friends, peers, and coworkers today can have similarly devastating impact on us if we don't have a filter and we're not careful to what we let come into our hearts and our minds. So, any examples or messages that you might receive from somebody in your community that gets in the way of achieving your goal? Did you want to add?
Well, I was just going to add, I was telling Laura when she was going over this slide, I've been counseling for probably 20 years, and I would think probably 90% of the people that come into counseling for whatever reason, there's this message of I'm not good enough. And I think, and there's various other ones as well, but, I think we get that from kids that are on the playground when we're younger. We may get it from parents, we get it from, could be priests or pastors. We could get it from anybody. And as a 6-year-old child, you get this message somehow, and that's how you process it. But somehow it just follows you throughout your life until you kind of deal with that trauma.
Yeah, please go ahead with that, Carol. Any questions on messages we receive in childhood and how that can show up today in setting goals? And just give me a quick eye on time. I won't go into detail on these last ones, but there's fear of failure, fear of change, fear of disappointing yourself or others, and unresolved trauma can really creep up and make us feel like we're failures, when really there's just some things in our past we need to process and reintegrate. So there's a list of unresolved trauma signs and symptoms in your packet, and just for time's sake, I'm not going to go over those, but if we have time at the end, we can circle back. I just wanted to talk quickly about the risks of goal setting. And it seems kind of funny to think of making positive, healthy changes in our lives being risk, but there's a systems theory which says changing one part of the system changes the whole. And we all live in families and communities, society, work environments, and people are used to us being the way we are, for better or for worse. And as soon as we start changing our own lives, that's going to affect that entire system we live in. So an example in my own life is several years ago, I wanted to be more assertive. I was like a lot of women, and still am working on it, but do everything for everybody and not prioritize myself, and be the one who says yes, be the one who takes care, be the one who is really not thinking about my own needs and my own self. And so when I started saying no, people were surprised. And I got some pushback from some people, and some people were really supportive, but some people were like, don't be a bitch, Laura, what's going on? You know, this is different. So I think it's important that when we're setting goals to talk about those systems we're in and talk about how it's going to impact us. And then last, whatever we're doing is working, is serving a purpose. And so when you change that, you're going to lose either a coping skill, you might lose a friend, you might lose a club you like to hang out at. So it's important to think about how the goal is going to impact all these things. And now we'll have Carol come up.
So I'm not crying because I have to do public speaking. I actually have a clogged tear duct, so if you see me rubbing my eye, it's not an issue. So anyway, now we're going to talk about kind of strategies for change. So SMART goals, and we're going to go into this in a minute. Act as if you're already doing it can be helpful. Don't scratching the itch, repetition, mindfulness, and self-compassion. So the 5 criteria for an effective goal is, again, the SMART goal. And that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And if you have all of these things, you're more than likely to kind of follow through with the goal. And this is an example of one. So specific. So, and we use, since Laura never makes goals, we put her in here. So she's going to improve her health by exercising more. And if you know anything about Laura, that's really not what she needs to do. But she does quite a bit of that. So that's specific. She wants to improve her health and she wants to exercise more. The measurable piece of it, this is how you will know it's being accomplished. So if you just say, I'm going to walk a few days a week, that's not very measurable. But if you say, I'm going to walk 30 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's measurable. Does that make sense? And I think that's sometimes where we get in trouble. And you want to make sure it's achievable. Yes, Laura can walk 30 minutes 3 days a week. Now, if this was a 90-year-old woman in a nursing home, that would not be an achievable goal for her. So it needs to be something that you personally can achieve. Realistic. Yes, this is realistic. Like an unrealistic goal, like Laura rock climbs. She lives in Colorado, that would be a good thing. If she lived on the beach in the Bahamas, that wouldn't be a very realistic goal, that she would learn how to rock climb in the next 3 months, say. So you need to make sure it's realistic. And then this bottom one that you might not be able to see is the time frame. And that would be just like, when will I know that I've accomplished this goal? So, starting tomorrow for the next 3 months. So that's the time frame that she's actually measuring it. And in your packet, this may look a little bit different because we've changed it up, but if you want a picture of this slide, we can definitely send it to you. And so the next thing is that, our brain. How many times does our brain get in the way? Our brain thinks that we are already finished before we even get started. And when we actually set a goal, our brain feels like we've already accomplished it. So that's like when you actually set a goal to go on a diet or set a goal to run a half marathon. You know how excited you get when you're setting that goal? That's because your brain's thinking you've already accomplished it, but you really haven't. The other thing is that the brain is really hardwired to get mad and frustrated when it loses something that it already has. So if it already thinks you've accomplished that goal and then you start towards it and you're not accomplishing it, then you're in trouble there too. So we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness later and self-compassion, and this can kind of really help in that area. And the next thing that is helpful is repetition. So, our brain really kind of thinks in pictures. So, and this is where I was talking, one of the strategies was act as if you're already doing it. So if you can start even imagining and picturing yourself over and over again walking that 30 minutes a day or eating that plate of veggies, healthier food, that's going to help. I can't remember where I read this, but it's been years ago, but somehow, our brain, we actually have like 70 thoughts in a day. 70,000 thoughts a day. 70,000 thoughts a day, which that's a lot. So, and most of them are pretty repetitive or they're kind of mundane. And so if we think about repetition really helps and we start changing our thoughts and repeating these more positive thoughts, then that's going to be more helpful. The other thing about this is that when you think about it, you're not really changing like your diet or you're going to exercise better. You're really changing your whole paradigm of who you already really think you are. And so when you start to do that, it's going to be like, if you're starting to eat like more veggies or whatever, your brain's going to be telling you, your old paradigm is going to be telling you, oh, that's okay, just have that little slice of bread. That's not going to hurt you at all. And if you know me, I love bread, and that is a problem. I can't just have one little bite of bread. So that's another thing with repetition, though, that really helps. Does that make sense? Y'all have any questions? And this is talking about don't scratch the itch. I love this little cartoon. It's like, oh man, my head itches. Don't scratch it. Because we all know when something itches and we scratch it, it just gets worse. It's just this like vicious cycle. And somebody told me this looks like marijuana up here, but it's actually poison ivy. We do live in Colorado, so when we scratch it, it starts this vicious cycle. And there's this term in Buddhism, which don't know much about Buddhism, but I like Pema Chodron. She's this Buddhist nun, and she talks about Shimpa. Does anybody know about Shimpa in here? And it really is our attachment to something or our hook. So it's not necessarily even when you, like say you want that cookie or whatever, and you have that thought, that's the Shimpa. That's where you have to stop it. It's not after you go over there and you actually eat 2 or 3 cookies. So it's like, and that's where it's like, don't scratch the itch. Once you have that thought, you want to catch it there. And so to help with that, being more mindful during that time, which is actually just being in the present moment, sitting with that ucky feeling of, oh, I really want that cookie. And then, committing to a better alternative, changing that thought, that can be really helpful. Is there anything else you? No. Okay. I thought you. So now we're just going to watch this little video, and it's called The Fly. And so does anybody mind if I turn off the lights? It's just easier to see. don't scratch that itch. It's just gonna make it worse. Does that make sense? So now we're gonna talk a little bit about self-compassion. So who in here is really hard on themselves? Oh, come on. We're all our worst little, what's the word I'm looking for? Critic or whatever. So really this is the secret to sticking to your goals, is being self-compassionate. You know, we're so much harder on ourselves than we are on everybody else. You know, if your friend came to you and said, you know, I really hate Zumba, and I don't want to go. You know, what would you tell them? Yeah, you need to do what you enjoy. That's all right. Or I gave up sugar, and Laura ate that cookie. You know, I wouldn't tell her, you know, well, you're an awful person because you ate that cookie. You know, be like, it's okay, it's just one cookie. Just get right back on it. Don't, you know, you'd be compassionate, wouldn't you? And we're not compassionate to ourselves. So this is actually the definition of self-compassion. And Kristen Neff, actually Laura and Audrey and I went to this conference in the fall, and it was Kristen Neff, and she's done a lot of research on self-compassion. And so the definition, I mean, you can see it, but when we suffer caring for ourselves as we would care for someone we truly love. And it includes self-kindness, a sense of common humanity, and mindfulness. And we're going to go into that a little bit more. Oh, I forgot about this slide. So this is actually an idea I got from Chris Carr, who's done a lot of stuff. I mean, she's written a lot of books, but she also has like these little, they're called Crazy Sexy Love Notes. She's done a lot of work in the cancer kind of arena. But one of her suggestions I read one time that I thought was really helpful is that keeping a picture of yourself around your house. I saw your walking girl screw up like, why would I do that? And, you know, when you're being very critical, when you're being very hard on yourself, you know, look at that picture of yourself when you're a little girl, a little boy, and ask yourself, would you treat that child that way? Would you talk to her that way? And my guess is the answer would be no, because we don't treat children that way. And that's can be really helpful when you're being hard on yourself. So these are the three components of the self-compassion definition, just a little bit more in depth. So self-kindness versus self-judgment. You know, treating yourself with care, you know, instead of, telling yourself that you're never going to accomplish this goal, or you're a bad person because you can't meet this certain goal. That can be really helpful. Common humanity, recognizing that life is imperfect. You know, we are all just individuals on a journey, and none of us are perfect. I tell every client that walks through my door pretty much that, you know, we all come from dysfunctional homes. Some of them are more dysfunctional than others, but, you know, we all have our stuff. And, you know, so no matter who we are. And so, you know, just recognizing that, and that we're all in this pretty much together. And then the last one is mindfulness versus over-identification. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, the Shimpa, just being able to sit with that pain and discomfort. And, you know, we all want to kind of avoid that. Nobody wants to sit with that. But the reality is that we don't really work through it unless we can sit with it. Because otherwise it's just like shoving it under the rug, you know, and it's going to come up later. So, does that make sense? And this, I like this one too. Dear me, I choose a new inner voice. The compassionate over the critical. So self-compassion has really been shown to be linked to well-being. So when we're self-compassionate, there's less shame, there's less issues about our body image, there's less anxiety, and there's definitely more just overall happiness and self-confidence in an individual. So you can see where if we're setting goals, that self-compassion is going to be a lot better. It's going to benefit us a lot more than if we're critical to ourselves all the time. And then this one is, this is kind of what happens when we do start some self-compassion. And it's also like if somebody like has an addiction and they stop drinking, or, you know, they stop doing, stop eating a lot of sugar, you know, whatever they were numbing in themselves, once they stop doing that, it starts coming up. And that's kind of what happens here with the self-compassion, you know, because your body doesn't really know what to do with it when you're being nice to yourself. But it's just part of the transformation process. It has to happen. So when you start to be kind to yourself, these are some of the things that can happen. You can start feeling the grief and the fear and the sadness, feeling that you're unworthy. And so just knowing that that is part of the process, and it's something that you have to work through. It's like, you know, do you all know about lotus flowers and how they grow? You know, they grow in the mud. You know, it's like, I can't remember who wrote a book called No Mud, No Lotus. But you don't reach this point of being this beautiful lotus flower, this wonderful human being, without basically working through your stuff. That's probably not why y'all came here, huh? To hear. That's something that you have to do. So right now, we're actually going to do a self-compassion break exercise. And this is in your handouts, but you don't need to get them. I'm just going to go over it with you. But it's something that you can do when you're at home by yourself. So right now, I just want everybody to think of something that you're stressed about or emotional discomfort. I mean, nothing too big, just something kind of minor that, I mean, we all have stresses in our lives. Or do you all have something kind of in mind that you could do? Okay. So now if everybody wouldn't just mind kind of sitting back and closing your eyes, and then I'll kind of just walk you through the self-compassion exercise. So when you notice that you're feeling stress or emotional discomfort, see if you can find the discomfort in your body. Where do you feel it the most? Make contact with the sensation as they arise in your body. Now say to yourself slowly, this is a moment of suffering. And that's what we've been talking about. That's the mindfulness part, just being able to acknowledge that this is something that you've been dealing with, and it's a moment of suffering. Now say to yourself, suffering is part of living. Some other options here may be, I'm not alone. Others are just like me. We all struggle in our lives. Now say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. Other options could be, may I accept myself as I am. If you're having difficulty finding the right words, imagine that a dear friend or loved one is having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person, heart to heart? If your friend were to hold just a few of your words in their mind, what would you like them to be? What message would you like to deliver? Now see if you offer the same message to yourself. So how was that for people? Is that hard to do? I think it can. I think, like I said, I think we can all be our own worst critics. So when we start being compassionate to ourselves, I know when we were at the conference, I remember thinking, this is hard, you know, because that's just not something that we typically do. So, and that's really all we have.
Yeah, I just wanted to
So-
point out that we have some flyers on the table for employee support services. So all employees and their family members each get 3 free visits of counseling calendar year. And we don't define who your family is, so anybody who would like. And we'd be happy to talk maybe about some barriers that are getting in the way of accomplishing your goals, or more on the self-compassion piece, or anything in your life. Any questions before we have questions? Thank you, guys.
And if you are interested in the self-compassion, that book by Kristen Neff is really good.
Yeah.
And we can actually send that out to people.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank
Thank you.
you.